Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Stabenow. And good evening, once again, Michigan Democrats. I am so thrilled to be here. It is great to be here tonight. And I will tell you that I have been in serious need of some pure Michigan. And we have gotten that tonight, haven't we? I have so many good memories from the time that I spent here during the 2012 cycle, and with the 2016 election ramping up, I am looking forward to joining all of you on the campaign trail again. So thank you, Senator Stabenow, for that warm introduction and for your strong leadership in the United States Senate, for the people of Michigan, and of course for all Americans. Debbie Stabenow is a true public servant. To watch her at work as the chairwoman of the Senate Agriculture Committee was such a moment of pride for me and many of our colleagues. She worked tirelessly on the Farm Bill last year and got it across the finish line with determination and grace, like she always does. That was an important victory for Michigan and for farmers and related industries across the nation. Debbie, it is thanks in no small part to your steadfast leadership that the Farm Bill got done, and it doesn't always get done, so thank you so much. Thank you. Now, I always say that if you want to get the hard work done, then give it to a woman. And if her name just happens to be Debbie, then she's absolutely certain to deliver. Michiganders know what I'm talking about. You've got Senator Stabenow and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell representing you. So thank you so much for sending us Debbie, both Debbies. I also want to acknowledge two wonderful colleagues here tonight as well. Our new Dean of the House, Chairman John Conyers. My former chairman sat on Judiciary for 5 years and was so privileged to serve under his leadership. And all of our friend, Sandy Levin, who is really toiling tirelessly in the wilderness on behalf of working people and families as the ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. He's done a remarkable job. And tonight I have had the honor and privilege of being able to help you honor two great statesmen, two sacred sons of Michigan, John Dingell and Carl Levin. Thank you. Where do I begin to talk about these gentlemen, my friends? The only solace that I take in the fact that John Dingell is no longer Dean of the House is the fact that Debbie is now representing the people of Michigan's 12th District in Congress. And you are also so fortunate to have her serve on the Democratic National Committee because, like me, one job for Debbie Dingell just isn't enough. Chairman Dingell, you are a giant among us. And that is not an exaggeration. You've helped make history, and you've been instrumental in making positive changes in the lives of millions of people from your work bolstering the American auto industry, ensuring civil rights for all, and making health care a right and not a privilege in this country. Generations of Americans will have more opportunities and more access to live the American dream because of your work. We are all so truly grateful for your distinguished leadership and for your service, and it was a tremendous privilege, professionally and personally, to be able to serve under your leadership in the House of Representatives. And on a personal note, I will never forget how instrumental John Dingell was in helping me pass a signature piece of legislation, the Virginia Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, so that we could stop childhood drownings and near drownings in swimming pools, preventing untold heartbreak for families that would not be law today without John Dingell's help and his leadership. So thank you so much. Thank you. Another incredible chapter in the book of Michigan's public service to America is Senator Carl Levin. I've had the privilege of sitting next to him tonight, and Senator, I know you still got that fire in your belly. We can see it. You continue to do that in your life's work, particularly your advocacy for our men and women in uniform, our veterans and their families. You were a bellwether in the often tempestuous goings-on of Capitol Hill, and I am especially appreciative that we were able to work together to honor the life, spirit, and memory of Anne Frank during last year's tree planting and Days of Remembrance ceremonies. So thank you so much for your help with that. Michigan and our nation owe both of these men our gratitude for giving decades of their time, their intellect, and talent to make our nation stronger and better. I am proud to join State Party Chairman Lon Johnson, who is doing a fantastic job. As you can see tonight, it is 20 to 10, and this room is still full. I can assure you I've done one or two of these around the country, my friends, and that is not the case at every JJ across the United States of America. And it is in no small part to the effort and work ethic of Lon Johnson and his executive director, Garrett Arwa. They're both doing an absolutely fantastic job and really deserve your thanks. I also want to acknowledge and thank my fellow DNC members who are here tonight: Nancy Quarles, Jill Alper, Steve Cook, Cindy Estrada, Barry Goodman, Bob King, Darrell Newman, Mayor Dennis Archer, and Virgie Rollins, and all of you to share this evening to salute these two extraordinary men. So I am also inspired to be here in the Motor City. I know that Vice President Biden was just here speaking to the NAACP last weekend, and I'm pretty sure he said, "Detroit is coming back." Now, with due respect to the Vice President, the folks that I've talked to prefer to quote another pretty hip guy when they say, "Don't call it a comeback. Detroit's been here for years." And some of you know what I mean. And now, Detroit and its citizens are boldly setting the standard for reinvention. Yes, this quintessential American city has known good and hard times, and it's those lessons that give life to the renaissance that is happening here. Slowly but surely, Detroit is proving that it is a city of ingenuity, tenacity, and vision. I'm excited about the future for the city of Detroit and all of its citizens, and I'm excited about Michigan with its great quality of life, world-class universities, and centers of industry, research, and innovation. Michigan is a state where our democratic values and priorities flourish, and it is the people in this room who embody those values and priorities each and every day. Now, I know 2014 was a mixed bag for Michigan Democrats. John Dingell and Carl Levin will be missed dearly. But Debbie Dingell and Gary Peters are up to the challenge of filling their shoes and have already done wonderful work in their great new roles. We're also thrilled to have Brenda Lawrence as part of Michigan's delegation in Congress. She did a great job tonight, I think. It makes sense that you elected Brenda, who was a leader of leaders, as chair of the National Association of Democratic Mayors, and she has, of course, hit the ground running since she's been in Congress and is one of 3 new African-American women elected to the Congress in the House of Representatives, and that is a remarkable feat in and of itself, and we're so proud of her. Now, regrettably, we weren't able to defeat Governor Rick Snyder during his re-election bid, but at least we finally know that he's not running for president. Of course, that just means that he'll continue to inflict on Michiganders and what he's been doing for the last 4 years, but thank you for saving us from him. In all seriousness, since November, Democrats have taken a close look at what went wrong and what went right. We've had to do a lot of much-needed soul-searching. We've had to look deep into our core and remind ourselves what we Democrats believe. What made us check that box when we registered to vote, or when we decided to leave the dark side and switch parties? What made us Democrats? My friends, I love this party. I'm proud to stand up and say, I'm a Democrat. And I know you are too. But our passion for this party only gets us so far. We cannot just say we're Democrats. We must do a better job of telling people our stories, telling them why we are Democrats. I have one of the best jobs in the world as chair of the Democratic National Committee because I get to tell people I'm a Democrat all across this country. I was so honored when President Obama asked me to serve, to do my part fighting for the values that we all share as Democrats. Just in the last month, I've been to South Dakota, Arkansas, California, Massachusetts, and just this week in several states throughout the Midwest, helping elect more Democrats and reminding voters that we are the party of equality and opportunity. Not the Republicans. It is us. But on this eve of Mother's Day, I can tell you that there is no job or title better than the one that I wear at home as mom. There is nothing else that I will do in my life that is as fulfilling, as challenging, or as rewarding as being a mother. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask all the mothers in the audience tonight to please stand. Everyone, please join me in giving them, all the moms here, because we provide a tremendous public service. A round of applause in wishing all of them a happy early Mother's Day. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me. As my fellow moms in elected office will tell you, being a mom takes your commitment to public service to a whole new level. And frankly, it's one of the big reasons that I'm a Democrat. Now, don't get me wrong. I've always been a Democrat. And Carl, I think I'm going to steal that D in the DNA thing. That's a very good line. I think I'm going to borrow that one in the future. I really, you stole it? Good. Well, thank you for passing it on. I appreciate it. I remember when I was growing up asking my own mother why she was a Democrat. And her answer was clear. We used to talk about this at our kitchen table at dinner. Because Democrats care about people. It was a very simple answer. Because our government has the ability to affect real change in people's lives. And as a Jewish family, as good citizens in this society, we believe, she would tell me, that it is part of our responsibility to help others. We even have a special term for it in our community, tikkun olam, repairing the world. And Sandy and I and the other Jewish members in Congress talk about tikkun olam all the time. Each of us feels truly like we made tikkun olam a career choice. Those kitchen table conversations became the fabric of who I am at my core. And so I never looked back. I knew immediately when my mom answered that question that I was a Democrat. Now, I'm sure that for many of you, it was the same thing. I wonder how many people in this room lived in a home where photos of FDR and JFK were hanging on the walls right next to the photos of Grandma and Grandpa. Maybe even above them. You know what I'm talking about. And I've always known what I was supposed to be fighting for. Even before I had my kids, I knew that I wanted to be a children's advocate in government. Now, I think we share a general intuition that children are the most vulnerable members of our society. At least we Democrats do. Now, what we do now will help shape the world of their future. But as the parents in this room know all too well, until you have kids yourself, it's not the same understanding as actually being a parent. My Rebecca, Jake, and Shelby have brought my mission into sharper focus, understanding not only the threats that we hope to protect our children from, but also the opportunities that we want to be sure are open for them. There's another experience, along with being a mother, which has underscored for me why I'm a Democrat. And as exhilarating as having children was, this one was equally as devastating, and that's being diagnosed with breast cancer. At a time when you want to be strong for yourself and for others, the greatest sources of joy in your life all of a sudden become the triggers of your deepest fears. You can't help but think of the baseball games, graduations, and the weddings you might miss. You wonder how many Mother's Days you might have left. Even now, healthy and cancer-free 7.5 years later, thank you, sure is better than the alternative. I still have trouble imagining what would have happened if in 2008, when I was one of the tens of millions of Americans who may have been uninsured or underinsured. Thankfully, I had the peace of mind knowing that I could afford to see a doctor, that I had health insurance, that my family wouldn't be crushed under the cost of my health care. And now, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, more than 16 million Americans have gained access to quality, affordable health care, too. More Americans have the peace of mind that they won't go bankrupt because they get sick, that young people can stay on their parents' health care, that seniors don't have to cut their pills in half to afford their prescription drugs. And we all have stood online at one time or another behind that senior, I know I have in my district, who has to ask the pharmacist to put some prescriptions back because they couldn't afford to take them all home. That angst is a worry of the past, thanks to the Affordable Care Act. What is also a relic of the past is that being a woman is no longer treated like a pre-existing condition, thanks to the Affordable Care Act. And my friends, Republicans want to take that away from them. Our Republican colleagues in Congress have voted more than 50 times to repeal or undermine the Affordable Care Act. Scott Walker, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, all of them have cited repeal among their top agenda items should they become president, God forbid. Chris Christie called the law a failure, and Jeb Bush had said that it doesn't work. Well, healthcare spending is growing at its slowest rate in 50 years. In 2015, 8 in 10 consumers could find a coverage plan for $100 or less per month after tax credits. That's something to absolutely applaud about. Millions have gained access to insurance, and it would be millions more if we could do what Democrats did here in Michigan and persuade our Republican governors across the country to finally stop obstructing health care, stop throwing obstacles in the path of every person who needs a little bit of help, and expand Medicaid. And don't even get me started about my home state's Governor, Rick Scott. How sad it is that you know who he is. And not for good reasons. And his repeated failure to do the right thing for approximately 1 million Floridians who could have health insurance if he dropped his opposition to Medicaid expansion. I have a news flash for Republican governors. The Affordable Care Act is working. It is working. Despite you throwing everything in the kitchen sink in its way, it is still working. Do you know why? Because middle-class economics works. Because fighting for families works. Because providing opportunities for all Americans to climb the ladder to the middle class works. Because when Barack Obama took office 6 years ago and inherited an economy that had been losing 750,000 jobs a month, a housing market bubble that had burst, an auto industry, no one knows that better than here in Michigan, in danger of collapsing, he didn't turn his back on you and tell your family to pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps, did he? No. President Barack Obama went to work. He put policies in place that worked for the American people. It is under Democratic leadership that we just experienced our 61st straight month, more than 5 full years of private sector job growth, my friends. Pay and benefits. Pay and benefits rose in 2014 by the most in the last 6 years, and the auto industry is thriving once again. President Obama, thank you. President Obama and Democrats have worked hard to help working Americans dig out of the hole they were left in after the Great Recession. But at each step of the way, we've been met with Republican obstruction and opposition. Now, it's fitting that Ted Cruz was the first Republican to jump into the presidential race, because he's been their de facto leader in Congress for the past 2 years. And he's the embodiment of everything that's wrong with the Republican Party. You remember Ted Cruz, right? He led the fight to shut down the government so he could deny people access to quality, affordable health care, and it cost the economy $24 billion in the process. And he was ready to do it all over again when he threatened to shut down the Department of Homeland Security over the president's action to keep families together while the House continues to obstruct immigration reform. Now, these are just a few of the big issues that we face. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, and there were some allusions to that tonight. Preventing another economic crisis on Wall Street. Addressing climate change so that our kids grow up in a world with clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. John Dingell didn't spend all those years fighting to make sure that that was possible, for us to allow it to just be undone because the Republicans are obsessed with really playing to their base and worshiping at the altar of the Tea Party. Enough is enough. Fixing our broken immigration system must happen. We need leaders who will do what's best for our country, not who want to pander only to their base. Am I right? Marco Rubio says he's a leader with fresh ideas, but then he ran away from his own immigration reform package when right-wing Tea Partiers just put the slightest bit of pressure on him. Now, if you cave that easily on an issue so vital to our families, our economy, and our national security, and that supposedly is so important to you, how are you going to handle being the leader of the free world? Now, I think that says a lot about Marco Rubio's leadership. Last time I checked, there's a wee bit of pressure on the President of the United States, and you need to deal with tough issues, not just fold up like a house of cards. But putting aside the hard stuff, Republicans are getting us hung up on the stuff that should be easy, like whether Congress should pay our nation's bills or keep the government open to do our jobs. We can't even agree on seemingly straightforward issues of fairness like equal pay. The very first bill signed into law by President Obama, if you remember, was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. And that set the tone for an administration that would prioritize middle-class economic policies that help families make ends meet. The Republicans running for president in 2016, they haven't quite shown the same leadership. No, they've done just the opposite. In fact, it wasn't enough just to vote against the Paycheck Fairness Act in the Senate. Ted Cruz derided it as a show vote. Marco Rubio said it was wasting time. And not to be outdone, Rand Paul compared it to the Soviet Union's Politburo, while Jeb Bush didn't even know what paycheck fairness was. I'm not kidding. Chris Christie and Rick Perry both vetoed equal pay legislation in their home states, and Scott Walker went further and repealed equal pay enforcement in Wisconsin. That, Michigan Democrats, that is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. If you leave here tonight with one thing to take back to your communities, take this. Democrats will fight for the middle class and Republicans won't, period. Bottom line. No two ways about it. Just look at Governor Mike Pence's legislation in Indiana that could have allowed business to discriminate against the LGBT community. Jeb Bush was right there with the Republicans, throwing his support behind Pence. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, while Republicans should be helping us guarantee economic opportunity, they're obsessively focused on an array of divisive social issues. Rand Paul, the guy who's supposed to be broadening the GOP's appeal, he spent the first week of his campaign arguing with me about denying women the right to make their own health care decisions. Hey, Rand, just between us, one person on the ballot in 2016 and another who's trying to get there, that's not how you win women voters. But that's a fight that we will take on every single time. Just like Brenda Lawrence said, it's none of the government's business what we do with our bodies. And a little more free advice for Rand, you also don't win young voters when you call for slashing Pell Grants, oppose net neutrality, or belittle LGBT rights by saying that you don't believe in rights based on people's behavior. How many of you remember when the GOP sent Rand Paul up here to Detroit to open up an African American engagement office? Are you kidding me? I thought it was a joke. How do you expect to broaden the GOP's appeal to African Americans when you voiced opposition to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act? When you believe in a business's, quote, right to discriminate? I'll tell you, you don't. That's not how you expand equality and opportunity. It is the Democratic Party that truly knows how. And just to circle back to where I started, that, my friends, is why I am a Democrat. And I know that is why you're a Democrat also. We are the party of inclusion, empowerment, and expanded opportunity. We are fighting to ensure that all Americans have their fair shot and a chance to get ahead. We believe that no one should be discriminated against because of who they are or who they love. And under Democrats, don't ask, don't tell is a thing of the past. It is over. The Defense of Marriage Act, struck down. And marriage equality is spreading from state to state, and in my heart of hearts, I know it will be legal across the U.S. soon, including here in Michigan, because love, my friends, is love. Love is love, plain and simple. Democrats, we're fighting to ensure that all Americans can afford the cornerstones of a middle-class life: childcare, health care, a home, education, retirement. Really radical stuff, right? Democrats understand the crucial role that unions have played over the last century in empowering working Americans to climb the ladders of success. Here in Michigan, Governor Snyder broke his word by pushing through right-to-work legislation. And that was a part of a nationwide effort aimed at undermining a source of strong Democratic support, but also a devastating blow, more importantly, to the labor protections that so many workers have come to take for granted. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has been amongst the most antagonistic Republicans in targeting organized labor, and it's one of the clearest examples of his adherence to his ideological views and pleasing special interests at the expense of working Americans. Walker says he wants to bring Wisconsin to Washington, but the truth is he's already brought the worst of Washington's dysfunction and divisiveness to Wisconsin. Earlier this year, while he was campaigning in Iowa, Walker compared hardworking Wisconsinites to ISIS. Now that should tell you everything you need to know about his view of working Americans. He's more committed to fighting against them than for them. These are the fundamental differences between Democrats and Republicans. I know it, and you know it, but does your neighbor know it? Does the mom you carpool with know it? Does your community know it? Do voters know it? Do your coworkers, your parents, your grandparents, and children know it? Until they all do, it is our job. It is our mission. It is what all of us must do for the Democratic Party, for Americans, for our children, for our grandchildren. We must get out there and educate people who are not in this room. This is the choir. We're all preaching to the choir. We get it already. We have to go out and talk to voters and donors and community leaders and activists and tell them what it means to be a Democrat. And we need to do it through every channel possible, from voter registration to candidate training. Now, even though Democrats faced tough losses in 2014, our issues won where they were on the ballot. Massachusetts passed a ballot initiative guaranteeing paid sick days for workers while electing a Republican governor. Alaska, Arkansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, all red states, passed measures to increase the minimum wage. Personhood legislation was defeated in where? North Dakota, and rejected by Colorado voters for the third time. These issues resonate with voters, and that tells me that we must do a better job making our case to voters that Democrats are on their side. We must do a better job sharing our values, helping people understand what we'll do for them once we're in office. I know each of you has a story like mine about what being a Democrat means to you. Now we need to distill our collective stories into one cohesive story, and that's the first recommendation of the Democratic Victory Task Force. As some of you may know, I assembled the Democratic Victory Task Force right after the 2014 election to conduct a thorough review and assessment of the Democratic Party's roles in recent elections, particularly midterms. First and foremost, among their recommendations was the launching of a national narrative project. We are working to develop a strong, values-based national messaging narrative that will engage, inspire, and motivate voters to identify with and support Democrats. And we will ensure that no matter who you are or where you're from, we can easily and succinctly communicate what makes us all Democrats. Because what's a little bit frightening is that if I walk throughout this crowd, a lot of you could probably more easily explain succinctly what it means to be a Republican than what it means to be a Democrat, and we have to change that. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable. And for one, I'm not too proud to say that out loud and to admit it. We have work to do. Their other recommendations included building stronger partnerships with our state parties and identifying and training the next generation of Democratic leaders, as Andrea Steele is doing with Emerge America and so many of the organizations and our allied groups that are working to train up and recruit that next generation of Democratic candidates, but not just candidates, campaign staff and advisors, activists and volunteers. I started my life as a staffer and never dreamed that I would be able to run for office and succeed when I did at 25 years old, but I did because I had a mentor. I had somebody who was encouraging me to take that next step, and we all have to make it our personal responsibility to find someone and pull them up on the rung of the ladder that we've just left. That's so imperative. Now the task force, thank you. The task force has held meetings and regional listening sessions, conducted individual interviews. They're still working. They've talked with more than 100 Democratic leaders across the country and surveyed 100,000 DNC activists. And they've consistently found that our supporters are looking for even more ways to get involved. So we'll continue exploring ways to help our supporters feel more connected and valued as welcome members of an open and accessible party. That is critical. Now, while the task force has been meeting to strengthen the party in the long term, the DNC has been busy making the transition from the 2014 to the 2016 election cycle. Last year, we launched the Voter Expansion Project. We're working with state parties to develop voter expansion programs in all 50 states. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of joining President Obama, Representative John Lewis, and other Democratic Party leaders and many of my colleagues in recognizing the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday and the March in Selma, which helped lead to the passage of the Voting Rights Act. It is difficult to believe that this fight continues half a century later, but we're still fighting not only to protect the franchise, but to expand it so that every eligible voter is registered, every registered voter is able to vote, and that every vote is accurately counted. It is the DNC's responsibility to be the vehicle which enables our candidates and party committees to take our values and our beliefs to voters. Now, in less than 15 months, on a stage in Philadelphia, the city where our nation was established, we will make history again. Democrats will officially nominate the person who will be elected as the 45th President of the United States of America. My friends, Michiganders, Michigan Democrats, we have 549 days to do everything we can, but who's counting, to show voters what it means to be a Democrat, to convince the majority of Americans that Democrats are still fighting on their side. We have a lot of work ahead of us. It won't be easy, but Michigan Democrats, you of anyone in this entire nation know that nothing worth doing is ever easy. And just like I'm excited about Detroit's future, I'm excited about the Democratic Party's future. Thank you so much for staying in the fight. On to victory in 2016, 2018, and beyond. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you tonight.